So sometimes we think of this feast of the Ascension in terms of Jesus ascended into heaven, which means he kind of said, see you guys later. I'm going to send someone who's going to help you, but I'm going somewhere else. And in a certain way, that's true. But in another way, it's not that Jesus is leaving us orphans. He's not just letting us go. He is drawing us deeper and deeper to where ultimately we're made to be. Because Jesus took on a human nature. And that nature ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. It's in the arms of our beloved Father. And because we are joined to Christ, because he joined himself to us, him ascending into heaven creates a magnet. In many ways, it's like this beautiful image up here of the Holy Spirit. And you see this hand reaching up, longing and longing for that light, that beautiful fellowship of Father and Son together. Because Jesus ascended into heaven, he's created this magnet to pull us and pull us and pull us, to realize that if we keep our eyes fixed on where he is, he's actually drawing us deeper and deeper into that reality. And that happens at every single celebration of Mass. There's a magnet here. And we could put up some kind of shield to keep that magnet from drawing us in, or we can let down the defense and allow this powerful gift of him ascending into heaven. And then he pours forth his Holy Spirit as that magnet of longing, drawing us deeper and deeper and deeper into his very heart. And if we have our eyes open and our hearts without the shield, we'll find that these celebrations of Mass are moments in which heaven comes and kisses us and says, welcome, a little deeper. So that's one of the aspects of the mystery of the Ascension. But the other aspect is when Jesus ascends, he mounts his thrones to shouts of joy, this blare of trumpets for the Lord. He is not leaving us, but he's actually coming up onto his throne to conduct the orchestra. He's rising up upon his mountain as a general, looking at all of his troops now and being able to call them into that battle of waging war against the enemy, against Satan, and all of his fruits and all of his empty promises. And so that's what the Ascension is. It's not him going away, but him actually going to this place where he's saying, now I'm sending you forth. I am clothing you with power. I am clothing you with the Holy Spirit so that you can begin to live my life in you. And in many ways, it's like taking this Paschal candle at the Easter Vigil. When the deacon comes in, he raises it up and he says, Light of Christ, Lumen Christi. That's an image of the Ascension. The light of Christ being raised up. But then do you remember what happens after that? We start lighting the candles. And everyone starts to take that same flame, and the whole place becomes bright and dazzling. It's the same fire, but now it's being lived out in every single candle that's here. Do you see how when Jesus says, it is good that I go, that I ascend to my Father? Because when I am lifted up there, then I'm going to pour out in such a way to allow my life to be multiplied. Because remember, when Jesus lived here on earth, he only traveled within a space of one of our smaller states in the United States of America. He was just traveling around Palestine. Israel. But when he ascended into heaven, he opened up this possibility of now allowing every single one of the baptized to live his life in the world, so that he can be present in Africa, in Asia, in North America, in South America, in Australia, all of these different places. And so this is what he wants to do with each of us. We've already received that Christ light. If we've been baptized, we have this gift within us. But how are we called to live it out? How are we called to become more Christ-like, to really become Christian in the real sense of that name? It's to be reminded of what happens at every single baptism. When that little baby's bald head has oil placed on the crown of it, that sweet-smelling, fragrant chrism. It's the best thing. Moms never want to have that child take a bath after that because it's just so amazing. They just want to stick their nose there. It's amazing. But when that child is chrismated, the priest or deacon says these words: just as Christ was a priest, a prophet, and a king, you too are entering into that mystery of his priesthood, in his prophetic role, and his kingship. Every single one of us here, if we're baptized, we have been called by our general to be priest, prophet, and king. And that's why in the Bible you hear so many times, you are a royal priesthood, a kingly priesthood. He's talking to the whole people of God. And yes, there are ministerial priests, which is a different particular calling. But even a ministerial priest, first and foremost, has been baptized. And he's called to live out this royal priesthood of every single one of us. And so how do we live this out? How do we become more and more Christ-like in the world? More and more chrismated in the world? So with those three ideas, priest, prophet, and king. Priest and king are about changing our worldly understanding of suffering. Kingly is changing our worldly understanding of power. And to be a prophet is to be a witness to what that change actually is. So a priest is called to offer sacrifice. And we're called to offer the sacrifice of our lives in such a way that we become like a candle, so that this candle becomes consumed, and all of this wax, sooner or later, is transformed into light, into fire. But it has to go through that burning process, and that can be a painful process. But in our particular day and age, suffering is something that we want to just fly from. We don't want to talk about. And sometimes we even have struggled in these areas in which we don't really even know what to do with suffering. We don't know what to do if someone says something unkind to us. And sometimes we get maybe too hung up in the words of microaggression and different things like that, which, yes, there can be things that we can deal with there, and that's really important, but sometimes we get so wrapped into that if someone says anything unkind to us, then all of a sudden we cancel them out. We shut them out because we don't really know how else to deal with suffering. We don't know how to take that suffering, that unpleasant feeling, and be able to allow the Lord to conquer it, to transform it, and to turn it into a prayer back. And so we strike back with vengeance in order to get rid of suffering, but by throwing the suffering out there. Instead of taking that suffering like Christ did, taking it upon ourselves and then allowing it to be transformed into love, into mercy, to be willing to get on the cross for one another. This is what the Christian is called to do, to allow the whole meaning of suffering to not be without hope, but to be able to proclaim as priests of Christ that you can even find joy in suffering. To be able to find the love of God even in the midst of pain and trial. To know that God is with us in this. And if you've ever had that experience of sometimes the moments in which your heart breaks open in such a painful moment is exactly the moment in which you feel held by God. This powerful paradox which Jesus himself experienced on the cross. Because even though he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He's praying a prayer during that whole time and ultimately saying, "Father, I commend myself into your hands because I know that you have me." And because of that peace that he experienced, even in the midst of his cry of anguish, he transformed all of suffering so that no matter what we go through in life, no matter what crosses happen to us, or the crosses that we choose to offer walking with someone else and bearing another's burdens, all of those things can be transformed into love, into glory, and we become light, showing that not even suffering can have the last laugh because it's been transformed by the Son of God. To be a king in his kingship is to allow power itself to be transformed, because in our particular day and age, power means no vulnerability. It means I have to play the Game of Thrones. I have to use whatever is necessary and use people as commodity and instruments to my satisfaction. And however I need to do that, to be powerful is to get on that throne and have everyone else bow before me. Fame, stardom, money, wealth, power, prestige, likes on Facebook, whatever it is. And yet, power, according to Christ, is actually total vulnerability. That's power. That's the king on his throne. And it's this rediscovery of vulnerability and being a gift to others. The person who is truly powerful is the one who's willing to empty himself, not to grasp, but to offer, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And this kingship is called to be lived out in allowing all of the sectors of society to experience this kind of gift, so that leadership gets put on its head, and leadership becomes the servant offering the gift of his presence, the gift of his talents, the gift of his life, to be able to lift others up. And a real practical example of this, it's actually one of my friends he owns a landscaping company. He takes care of a lot of different businesses in this area. But he said this to me once that I think is very powerful. He said, "I see my role as the owner of this company not to make a profit, but to be entrusted with several families that their well-being is my business." And the way that he even looks at his whole way of doing things is, how do I make sure that these families are taken care of, well provided for, and are allowed to flourish, because they're more important than the number on the profit. And even in the midst of that, he's very profitable, but it's because he's reversed things around. And this is what it means to transform power into service, into gift, into mercy. And so if you take both of these two things together, this call of allowing sacrifice to become a sacrificial love that conquers the bite of suffering to make it meaningful and full of hope, and even the experience of joy and love and mercy in the midst of it, and then you allow this sense of power to be transformed from domination to gift and service, then to be a prophet is to take all of that and to be a sign in the world A sign that makes people scratch their head saying, wait a minute, everything else is going this way. And it doesn't seem to be satisfying anyone. It seems to be just laying on the surface. And yet here's this person here who's living this completely different way, going upstream, and yet there's something about their life. There's some light that's shining from their life in their joy, in the way that they respond to trials, in the way that they respond to evil in this world, and they overcome evil with good. That I'm seeing something different, and it's something that I want. This is our call as baptized Christians. We've been empowered and clothed by the Holy Spirit to live these three offices out in our world. And to the extent that we live them out, to the extent that we enter into the suffering of Christ and to allow him to break the back of the evil one there, the moment that we empty ourselves and we become that light and that witness in the world, we become more and more close to Christ. And to the extent that we're close to Christ, we're actually closer to heaven. And we too are ascending with the Son who ascended into heaven more and more so that we can truly be where our heart was made to be, in the arms of our Father. So ask the Lord this summer, how am I called to enter more deeply into this priestly call, this prophetic call, and this kingly call? Because that is how you will become a baptized Christian more and more fully.